Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm so happy to see this lovely audience here. I am Julie Carr, and I am moderating tonight's reading. So this is the Poetry of the War in Vietnam and Its Consequences, which is the closing event of Waging Peace in Vietnam, which has been a 10-day series of events organized and curated by Ron Carver, Linda Yar, and a team of others here at CU Boulder. So I want to first just thank everyone who has worked on this project for bringing our attention to this history here at CU. And thank you especially to Ron and Linda for inviting me to moderate tonight's event because it's a really huge honor. So I'm going to keep my introduction pretty short. We have 8 poets to hear from. But I do want to acknowledge the relevance of tonight's event to our moment right now. There has been no time in human history that was not a time of war, Robert Duncan, the poet Robert Duncan, wrote. And while that is no doubt true, there are moments when war becomes, as William Carlos Williams said of World War II, the first and only thing. This seems to be one of those times. And for this reason, we need poetry as much as we need the news. This is also a personal event for me because I was born in 1966. My parents, and especially my mother, Karlin Grace, was an anti-war activist. Some of my earliest memories involve being a young child at anti-war protests. I learned what it meant to be an activist from this movement, which is to say, peace was the first and most important cause I was raised to stand for. The poets that are going to be reading tonight are American veterans of the Vietnamese-American War, and are Vietnamese-American poets who are writing through that history as it affected their families. In the seminar I am currently teaching on the poetry of war, we've encountered a diversity of approaches to the topic, from the similes of Homer's Iliad, which in their evocation of nature and movement seem to offer a counterforce to the overwhelming presence of death, to the sonnets of Wilfred Owen, in which the suffering and vulnerability of the soldier is presented as a cry for peace, to Apollinaire transforming shrapnel into jewelry for his beloved, while imagining a beyond of this earth, while on the front. From the gaps and silences in the Holocaust poems of Paul Celan and Nelly Sachs to the surreal images of René Char's poetry of the French Resistance. And from the efforts made by HD and other modernists to use poetry's multivocal and layering possibilities to generate a sense of shared humanity beyond the divisions of wartime. And to the direct cries of injustice and calls for community building found in Langston Hughes' wartime poems or Mahmoud Darwish's poems of exile. And then there are the documentary poets who make art not by turning away and not by imagining other worlds, but by turning directly to the brutal materials of war. All the poets we've read in this class, by pushing language into new shapes or forms, or by transforming old ones, insist on the private, public work of poetry as an answer to the violence of war. In what way an answer? I think tonight's poets will give us various ways to think about that. And I'll just say one very simple thing. Poetry in its elegiac memorial function and in its necessary and inevitable celebration and desire for vitality mourns the dead while fighting like hell for the living. For only in recognizing, naming, and sharing our grief and outrage do we actually live. So I'll end this little introduction with the final lines from Denise Levertoff's poem titled At the Justice Department, November 15th, 1969. That poem ends, "Nothing will do but to taste the bitter taste. No life other apart from." So these poets are going to be reading in alphabetical order by first name. The first reader will be Bruce Weigl. Soon after turning 18, Bruce Weigl enlisted in the Army and served in Vietnam for 1 year, beginning in December of 1967. He was awarded the Bronze Star and returned to his hometown of Lorain, Ohio. As Weigl states in his memoir, The Circle of Han, the paradox of my life as a writer is that the war ruined my life and in return gave me my voice. Weigl is the author of more than a dozen books of poetry, including On the Shores of Welcome Home, which was winner of the Isabella Gardner Poetry Award, The Abundance of Nothing, which was nominated for the Pulitzer Prize, and Song of Napalm, which was also nominated for the Pulitzer Prize. He's written several collections of critical essays and has published translations of Vietnamese and Romanian poetry, and has also edited or co-edited several anthologies of war poetry. Weigl's awards include the Robert Creeley Award, the Lannan Literary Award for Poetry, and others. So Bruce, if you could unmute yourself now, we will begin with you.
Here I am.
There you are.
Thanks, Julie. Hello, everyone, and I have to say how proud I am to be included in such distinguished company tonight. And I'm fortunate to say that I have many good friends among the group that's here. So it makes it even more pleasurable. I'm going to read 3 poems from a book that I published 35 years ago. I didn't realize until I said that how old that makes me seem. It's a book called Song of Napalm. This is called Girl at the Chulai Laundry. All this time I had forgotten. My miserable platoon was moving out one day in the war, and I had my clothes in the laundry. I ran the 2 dirt miles, convoy already forming behind me. I hit the block of small hooches and saw her twist out the black rope of her hair in the sun. She did not look up at me, not even when I called to her for my clothes. She said I couldn't have them. They were wet. Who would have thought the world stops turning in the war? The tropical heat like hate, and your platoon moves out without you, your wet clothes piled at the feet of the girl at the laundry, beautiful with her facts. Song of Napalm. After the storm, after the rain stopped pounding, we stood in the doorway watching horses walk off lazily across the pasture's hill. We stared through the black screen, our vision altered by the distance, so I thought I saw a mist kicked up around their hooves when they faded like cutout horses away from us. The grass was never more blue in that light, more scarlet. Beyond the pasture, trees scraped their voices into the wind. Branches crisscrossed the sky like barbed wire, but you said they were only branches. Okay, the storm stopped pounding. I'm trying to say this straight. For once, I was sane enough to pause and breathe outside my wild plans, and after the hard rain, I turned my back on the old curses. I believed they swung finally away from me. But still the branches are wire and thunder is the pounding mortar. Still I close my eyes and see the girl running from her village, napalm stuck to her dress like jelly, her hands reaching for the no one who waits in waves of heat before her. So I can keep on living, so I can stay here beside you. I try to imagine she runs down the road and wings beat inside her until she rises above the stinking jungle, and her pain eases, and your pain, and mine. But the lie swings back again. The lie works only as long as it takes to speak, and the girl runs only as far as the napalm allows, until her burning tendons and crackling muscles draw her up into that final position burning bodies so perfectly assume. Nothing can change that. She is burned behind my eyes, and not your good love, and not the rain-swept air, and not the jungle green pasture unfolding before us can deny it. And I'm going to end with a poem called The Kiss. And thank you all very much for having me this evening. I hadn't read these poems for many years, and reading them in the world that we live in now, they make a kind of sense to me that's disturbing. That they shouldn't make sense anymore, but because of what's happening in our world, they do. This is called A Kiss. All the goodbyes said and done, I climbed into the plane and sat down. From the cold I was shaking and ached to be away from the love of those waving through the frozen window. Once as a boy I was lost in a storm, funnel cloud twisting so near I was pitched from my bicycle into the ditch, picked up by the wind and yellow sky, my arms before me, feeling my way through the wind I could not cry above. Out of that black air of debris, out of nowhere, my father bent down, lifted me, and ran to the house of strangers. And again that day on the plane, he appeared to me, my forgotten orders in his hands. He bent down to put the envelope into my lap. On my lips, he kissed me hard, and without a word, he was gone into the cold again. Through the jungle, through the highlands, through all that green dying, I touched my fingers to my lips. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Bruce. I'm going to go back to, sorry. Thank you. Next, we'll have Doug Rawlings. Doug Rawlings was drafted into the U.S. Army in 1968 and was in Vietnam from July 69 to August 1970. He is a co-founder of Veterans for Peace. Rawlings' latest collection of poems, Cow Tray, Bamboo Bridge, written in collaboration with Teresa Mei Chuc, weaves together a Vietnamese refugee's reflections with his own. His other books include Orion Rising in the Shadow of the Amanese Mountains. He's also the editor of Letters to the Wall, 3 collections of 500 letters written to the Vietnam Memorial. Doug, you're on.
Thank you, Julie, and I share Bruce's feelings about being honored being here. I've got a few poems to read here. One is dealing with one of the popular myths was that, gee, what we really wanted when we came out of that war was a parade. No, I think most of us just wanted to disappear back into our lives. This first poem's entitled On Being Invisible. So you come home from a war alone, and within a week, the first place you want to be is in the bleachers of Fenway Park. One of many where no one knows who you were last week with your freaked out sense of mortality. Incoming, you caught out in the open last day in country, burying your face in the mud, becoming the mud. Please, dear God, please make me disappear, not be me, and I'll never, ever want to be anything more, ever again. I'm looking to be as diaphanous as the deer by the apple tree lost in the morning mist. Here today, gone tomorrow, nothing more, nothing less. Just let me come home and rest in the bosom of Wallace Stevens. For the listener who listens in the snow, and nothing himself, beholds nothing that is not there, and a nothing that is. Amen, brothers and sisters. Amen. This next poem is entitled November Comes. November comes on to me like a C-130 slinking into Dover Air Force Base, laden with tin caskets draped in red, white, and blue. I know, I should just let it be. Okay, I can still do this. Push my shopping cart down the local IGA's aisles, pick up cheese and wines and crackers while avoiding aluminum cans like the plague, pay the cashier, smile at the beggar, push the cart out into the parking lot, neatly place everything I just bought into the dumpster out back, light up a smoke, relax. Sure, you want me to join in on your celebrations, bless our bounty, accept your thanks for my service as if I were some pilgrim come home to receive your grace. It's November, you say, and we set aside a day just for you to wrap up war with a dissonance of fife and drum and bagpipes blaring down Main Street, as if we can all finally dance to the same tune. Sorry about that. My dancing days are long gone. I'd rather skate across the pond alone. I have more faith in ice. And what about the children in Vietnam? Here's a bicentennial poem I wrote in 1976, Bath, Maine. My daughter Jennifer is 2 now and can almost speak in complete sentences. Why, if this were 7 years ago and she Vietnamese, she would almost be old enough to sell her mother. That's what we did to some of the children over there. Next poem is entitled Giving Silence. If I can find it. I wrote this for my son turning 13. Giving Silence. If non-vets were ancient shamans, now would be the moment we choose to give you shelter from the coming storm. But we're merely survivors of suburbs and cities, not forest nor mountain. Modern men offering you our silences, our words to guide you going out on your own. Yet we have known for years now that the silences of our fathers will not do. And we have known that words alone cannot bleed you free of your raging doubts. So listen up to what we have found between silences and words. Open up your fists, watch women move, scorn uniforms, don't march, dance. Next poem is entitled The Girl in the Picture. It makes reference to the iconic picture of Phan Thi Kim Phuc and her fellow young people fleeing a village being napalmed. The poem itself, actually, sort of a little poetics here, started as a suicide poem. I live up in central Maine where there are a lot of circuitous roads, with, eskers with steep drop-offs on either side, much like Colorado has, by the way. And so I was imagining driving my truck down the North Road, going about 70 miles an hour, and then cranking the wheel and heading off into the whatever. And we used to call those single car suicides. There was a form of committing suicide that many Vietnam veterans chose, actually. So I was making this poem, and all of a sudden I read about Phan Thi Kim Phuc, the girl in the picture, that she was 9 years old when that picture was taken of her fleeing this village. It's an iconic picture. I recommend everybody pull it up and take a look at it. At that moment, my oldest granddaughter, was 9 years old. So this is the poem that came out of that. The Girl in the Picture. Begins with an aphorism: whatever you run from becomes your shadow. Whatever you run from becomes your shadow. If you're a non-vet, a survivor of sorts, she'll come for you across the decades, casting a shadow in the dying light of your dreams. Naked and 9, terror in her eyes. Of course, you will have to ignore her if you wish to survive over the years. But then your daughters will turn 9, and then your granddaughters 9, as the shadows lengthen. So you'll have no choice on that one night, screaming down the ridge road, lights off, under a full moon. She's standing in the middle of the road, still naked and 9, terror in her eyes. Now you must stop to pick her up, to carry her back home to where she came from, to that gentle village where the forgiving and the forgiven gather at high noon. There are no shadows. It's my poem of remorse, and I hope that happen one day. So I returned to Vietnam after 53 years this last August, and I went with my son Josh. And so this poem is entitled Vietnam Redo, Going Back for Josh. I look twice now where I used to look only once, like where routes 2 and 4 merge with Route 156, or when my imagination takes me to a little village just on the other side of the river Styx, where there truly was hell to pay those many years ago, across that river and up and down those swirling tides, where Beelzebub got to play with his gift box of G.I. Joes as we desperately hung on for his satanic little ride. I went back to that land of my 50-year-old dreams, thinking I'd finally put some nightmares out to pasture, hoping to quiet down those Mama San Beetle-mouthed screams, looking for that proverbial sense of closure. But who am I to expect more from this madly tortured land that once swallowed up my illusions of masculine grandeur and spat out a soldier boy who had tried to become a man, only to become a tool of that mindless, endless slaughter? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doug. Our next reader is Hoa Nguyen. Hoa Nguyen was born in the Mekong Delta region of Vietnam and raised in the Washington, D.C. area. She's the author of several books, including 1,000 Times You Lose Your Treasure, winner of the Canada Book Award, and a finalist for the Kingsley Tufts Poetry Award, the National Book Award, and the Governor General's Literary Award, and also Violet Energy Ingots, shortlisted for the International Griffin Poetry Prize. Nguyen is a member of She Who Has No Masters, a program for the Diasporic Vietnamese Artist Network. In 2021, she became a founding member of She Who Has No Masters writing mentorship program designed for and led by Vietnamese and Southeast Asian diasporic women and non-binary writers. Hoa.
Thank you, Julie. It's such a pleasure to be here in this context. I'm going to read a couple of poems from 1,000 Times You Lose Your Treasure, and then 2 new pieces. This poem's called Unrelated Future Tense. It's a mirror poem in that it begins, it gets to a middle, and then it flips itself. Unrelated future tense. With me being a bastard and Saigon tea will ask about my language. People will ask about bar girls. Even without food in the poems, they will smell fish sauce and pho, ask about the war, which is to say about men, fathers, and soldiers, about white Americans. What about them, about white Americans? What about men, fathers, and soldiers? Ask about the war, which is to say they will smell fish sauce and pho even without food in the poems. People will ask about bar girls, and Saigon tea will ask about my language, with me being a bastard. Overseas Vietnamese. Now I trail myself, the main travel way. This is a journey oblong, upper body movement, moving me towards the cartoon version of movement. We press toward the massacre tower, the sniper tower I once designed tours for. She told me her memory goes to dreams, deep-set embroidered vines, a long-haired girl, inset mother of pearl, Venus with fingernail new moon. We ask about spent flowers. We ask no things unanswered red garnets. Birthed and hollowed out, a box of rose, but also not rose, born of thee who dies more. Now I trail myself. She put her pain there, brass planter bougainvillea, gloss lacquer. She will die ordinary, rehearse the story. We be, we transcend history. This book, Thousand Times You Lose Your Treasure, I working with materials from my mother's life, including a time when she was a celebrated motorcycle stunt woman in an all-women motorcycle stunt group, circus in Vietnam. But this is a poem about her migrating to the US. Fortune cookie, no fortune. Not quite meandering chi-luck, more like vermilion songbirds than orange figure, maybe 9 months postpartum, a Kodachrome print in a standard squarish size, a size no longer a size, a floating island. She learned English from The Young and the Restless, a basement waterfall, lights up, leaning. Clay-colored flower pots we grew in, the way she sewed language silent months. Back then, in Vietnam, a mixed child was as good as dead. Remember the small wrapped cakes? They opened to see a flower. Wet eyelashes. And then this poem has a longish title. Dog no named to time and memory itself dissolved the tree. The small cloth terrier dog no named and tattered a new landmass some called America. We called it America, which had yet to address us, or has in a way, yellow violence, and cross a bridge across the Chesapeake, hellos spanning histories, which includes escape, present day chicken factories. We were not poor, we had things and food, a house on a street named Flanders. The stuffed dog may have had a small sweater. What was my attachment? Soft love, unloved, lost later, tree retreat with its big V digging into the bark with my teeth. How terrier sounds like terror. How the dog would watch for nothing of my young life. How my first memory is of violence or the aftermath of violence, ambulance lights cast against a cold wall. Fourth house Saturn in Pisces signals ancestor injuries that transform with healing, a surrender there to go unclaimed for small no name in the space of family injury, absorbed freely and released there. And in this last poem, I'm revisiting a memory that is, it's sort of an inherited memory because I don't have a memory of the Tet Offensive. I was only a year old. I was looking at an AP photograph of Vinh Long, which is where I was living at, where I was born and living at the time. And the caption of this aerial photograph of Vinh Long said, heavy damage suffered by the once beautiful Mekong Delta city of Vinh Long is evident in this aerial photo taken on March 6, 1968. 50% of the city was destroyed, beating back the Viet Cong Tet Offensive. Civilians and their homes were caught in the middle and were the real victims of the tragedy. The Vietnamese and American aircraft bombed large areas of the city in an attempt to weed out Viet Cong infiltrators. Here's the poem. Tet singing cure, almost a ghost. It tells the story of how I survived the trials. Tet singing cure, almost a ghost, for children and their caretakers during wartime. Ko Tu sang, not sleeping, the lamp lit 1-year-old toddler me near death, war attack aftermath with stomach sickness, having eaten corn, the available food in the form of Western aid, meager rations and poor water. The girl alone took ill. A tall front door in white orchids, parquet flooring, toddler flopping, sick or dying, not dying, rocked in the baby hammock to singing nonstop, to sang, not sleeping, the lamp lit and sung through the night, alive, the baby in the hammock, sway to keep death away, the wee girl in the hammock, thready between, talking across time, dirt heavy in hands, in need of sung protection, singing again since then, writing this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Hoa. Our next reader is Jan Barry. Jan Barry is a poet, author, and journalist. As a U.S. Army veteran of the Vietnam War, Barry coordinates warrior writers' workshops and programs for veterans and family members in New Jersey. After a war tour in Vietnam, he resigned from West Point to become a writer and a peace activist. A co-founder of Vietnam Veterans Against the War, his poems and essays on the war have appeared widely. Barry is the author of A Citizen's Guide to Grassroots Campaigns, Earth Songs, New and Selected Poems, and Life After War and Other Poems. Jan. Jan, I think you're still muted.
Sorry about that. Thank you very much, Julie, and for everyone else who put this program together, and to my fellow poets today. This is an amazing gathering, and hopefully we can do it again sometime. Veterans Day Talk. On November 11th, 1918, my grandfather on my father's side was on a stateside dock with his army unit about to ship out to fight in France. When word was received that the war had just ended, Armistice Day, they called it. Sometimes you're lucky in war, sometimes not. On November 11th, 1944, my mother's brother was killed in a Navy dive bomber that crashed into the sea in a battle near the Philippines. There was no armistice that Armistice Day. Surviving war is no guarantee it's over. Never know when something from the war may catch you unawares. A flare-up, a flashback, a smell from a bad day long ago. With bitterly contested wars still churning out more wounded, more dead, more veterans, there's still no armistice on Veterans Day, on Armistice Day. Veterans Day, they call it now, as though all those war emotions can be contained in a holiday. In Vietnam, I was a Boy Scout turned into an Army radio specialist. A communications breakdown in a war zone can be fatal. Communications failures amongst veterans and our support network of family and friends can also have fatal consequences. That's what we need to talk about today. After the parades, the bagpipes, the drums and trumpets, the bugle calls, the solemn speeches, the moment of silence, the hearty drinks at the bar, when memories of war still intrude into our dreams, our lives. Life after war. It can creep up on you. You came back in pretty good shape, but knew others who died. You'd rather not hear war news, but can't avoid war dreams so vivid you wake in a sweat. With each new war, old nightmares reflare. A buddy emails, says he's tired of endless battling with PTSD. Another calls to ask, did you hear about that vet who committed suicide? And then there's Dave, who fought the war demons every which way and died worn out at 60. What the hell are you going to do? You talk with some older folks who have lived a lot of life. Join groups tackling veterans' problems and civic groups for good causes. Get assistance for stuff from Vietnam. Like the malaria, some VA guy said, you couldn't have. and rage at war's senselessness that's not on any casualty list. But life keeps piling it on. Kids barely out of summer camp are enlisted to invade distant places. Peaceful folks are brutally assaulted in war zones and here at home. You try a survivor's support group, then another one after wife dies. Write, talk, create art about war. Share what's happening with others. One day, damn, you're an old timer who's lived a lot of life after a war. I'm going to also read from my latest book called Waging Art, Tackling Grief and Trauma with Creative Arts. These are about writing and art workshops that I participated with other veterans and family members over the years. These workshops, especially after the writing went online during the COVID pandemic, were a lifeline for me and a number of friends. Often the topics we wrote about were so immediate that we chronicled the ups and downs of life on the edge. VA admission. Just before Veterans Day, the VA sent a letter declaring I'm 100% disabled from disabilities that struck late in life due to the war in Vietnam. This is beyond amazing. Not that long ago, the VA told Vietnam vets it was all in our heads, that our mothers caused our problems, that it was none of their business. I could tick off the insults decade by decade. And now, just like that, I'm accepted into the inner sanctum of war heroes. No Purple Heart, but an Agent Orange admission ticket to VA care. In the writing workshops that I help coordinate, we often use I'm losing the words, prompts from what's going on in the news, but also in our daily lives. Thich Nhat Hanh died after a long illness at a pagoda in Vietnam at age 95. I saw an email message about it just as I finished a mindfulness session online provided by the VA. My first lesson in mindfulness was 50-some years ago, when this tiny Vietnamese Buddhist monk, who was born in colonial French Indochina and protested our war in Vietnam, transfixed a regiment-sized cohort of Vietnam vets at an anti-war encampment on the Mall in Washington, D.C. This poet of people we'd warred upon stunned us with his quiet eloquence, his voice conveying anguish from the farming villages we'd destroyed. This man of peace stood amidst towering combat uniform-clad warriors and shamed us to do more with our war memories, to tell the terrible truth mindfully. And the last poem I'd like to read, again, is right off of a particular day. Tropical depression. A tropical depression slammed into North Carolina and spun up the coast of Jersey in September. Been living with depressions for decades, tropical and otherwise. Started somewhere after I got out of the Army, where I was pretty chipper despite the craziness of battle zones, the bizarre waste of time of cadet hazing at West Point, and then being posted after I resigned from West Point to an infantry unit training to lay waste to wherever they were sent. Not sure when Daisy Days expanded into depression. Sometime as the war in Southeast Asia expanded and ground down senselessly. Some days I didn't see the point of getting out of bed. And then some vet or peace activist would call, and off I'd go to challenge a self-righteous nation waging war. And much to my amazement, speaking out against that monstrous war became a go-to antidote to the latest surge of depression. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jan. Thank you so much. Our next reader is Kimberly Nguyen. Kimberly is a Vietnamese American diaspora poet, originally from Omaha, Nebraska, but now living in New York City, and the author of Ghosts in the Stalk, and Here I Am, Burn Me, which won the Jack McCarty Book Prize. She was a recipient of a Beatrice Daw Brown Prize and was a finalist for Frontier Book Poetry's 2021 Open and New Poets Awards. She was a 2021 Emerging Voices Fellow at PEN America and was a 2022 and 23 Poetry Coalition Fellow. Please welcome Kimberly.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor to be among such distinguished poets who have way more experience than me. I'm only going to be reading 2 poems tonight. One of them is going to be from my debut collection, Here I Am, Burn Me. It's titled What I Mean When I Say the War is Still Here. And it's just kind of a reflection, I think, of growing up in a family where the history is so front and center and yet not really talked about. So this is what I mean when I say the war is still here. My family is not made of war. We are made of craters. A bomb exploded and broke the earth. Its dust flew up and cut the air. And what did we have left but wounded atmosphere? I often say my childhood was a war zone. What's the difference between war and its aftermath? When the dust settles back in its place, and at the first drop of the sour rain, how it all returned to itself, ash to ash, dust to dust, as if nothing had changed. What then do we know of endings, if the morning still comes again? The second poem that I'm going to read is actually a commission. I recently had the opportunity to travel to the central region of Vietnam, specifically the Quang Tri province, which was one of the most heavily bombed provinces in Vietnam. And I got the opportunity to observe Project Renew's all-women's team clearing out the unexploded ordnances left over from the war. It's incredible work. They let me push the button to destroy some of the unexploded ordinances. I was very nervous. I thought I was gonna screw up and then someone was gonna get hurt, but everything went fine. And they are the Friends of Project Renew, which is the US fundraising arm. They are kind of doing a capital campaign and they're redesigning their website, and they asked me to write a poem for their homepage. So this is the poem. It's brand new. I haven't even sent it over to them yet, so I'm debuting the poem here. And this poem is called Reaping What You Sow. What is the past but a wound? A dormant volcano erupting. The past breaks through the surface of the earth. A bomb in sudden heat. A violet opening wide its petals, seeds bursting. A purple garden of tragedies. Matter is neither destroyed nor created. I know everything I bury will return to me. Bury a seed, you eat the fruit of its tree. Implant a bomb, and you swallow a ghost, buried alive, returning now to die a second final death. Let us lay all these ghosts to rest. Let us revive what we thought was dead, a war still raging beneath the layers of the present tense. May the past be a wound we close, so the future can never reopen it. May the future be a garden and only flowers. Thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly. Our next reader is Teresa Mei Chuc, who was born in Saigon, Vietnam. Shortly after the Vietnam War, Chuc, her mother, and her brother were granted political asylum and settled in Pasadena, California. Her father remained in a Vietnamese re-education camp for 9 years. Chuc is the author of 3 collections of poetry, Red Thread, Keeper of the Winds, and Invisible Light. She is a fellow of and teacher consultant for the Los Angeles Writing Project and teaches writing and literature at a public high school. Please welcome Teresa.
Thank you, Julie. I'm so honored to be here. Writing these poems was part of my processing the trauma of the war and making sense of it, and also documenting my family story. This first poem is about our journey to the US. My mother, my brother, and I, we spent 3.5 months on a freight boat in the South China Sea. I was 2 years old at the time. Immigration. It is October when the winds of autumn blow strong in the Pacific. There are over 2,000 of us, sardines, barely human and starving. We sleep on the floor and wash ourselves with seawater. People are sick. When someone dies from sickness, she or he is wrapped in a blanket and tossed overboard during a Buddhist chant. I was only 2 years old and cannot recollect the dying next to me, nor can I recollect my constant coughing, nor can I recall seeing my mother's worried countenance as she contemplated our future, how my constant crying made her want to jump overboard. This next poem is also a true story. Cockroaches. A proposal by someone to my mom after the Vietnam War. Why don't you sell your baby? You don't have anything to eat. A response by my 4-year-old brother. No, don't sell my sister. There are lots of cockroaches for us to eat. When I returned to the country 18 years later, I saw them, large, brown, shiny tanks on the wall, evidence of my brother's love for me. This next poem is about my father's experience. So, as Julie mentioned, my father spent 9 years in a Viet Cong re-education prison camp. And when he returned, he had severe PTSD. And I was 9 years old when I first met him because my mom was pregnant with me when he was taken away. And I tried to understand his experience so I could process my experience with my father and the violence. Not worth a bullet. A bullet is made of copper or lead. Gunpowder is poured into the case. The firing pin hits the primer at the back of the bullet, which starts the explosion. Altogether, the bullet and the case are typically about 2 inches in length and weigh a few ounces. My father said that the Viet Congs told him and the other prisoners while in re-education camp that they were not worth a bullet. They would work for the Viet Congs and then die. A bamboo tree is smooth, long with roots that hold the earth with the strong grip of green knuckles and fingers. They are used to build houses, fences, etc. A bamboo tree can weigh 60 pounds or more and be 20 feet tall. The prisoners were forced to walk barefoot up the mountains and carry bamboo back to the camp. Due to the weight of the bamboo, they were only able to carry one at a time. This poem is about the first time I saw my father. When I first saw Daddy, he was like an Egyptian cat, skinny, foraging, and stern, just released from a Vietcong prison. He told us he hated the color red. 16 years later, he wears a red sweatshirt and smiles, the pin tip opening in his heart enough to let in a driblet of red. This next poem is about my Vietnamese name, which is on my birth certificate. Accents. Today, I decided to write with brush and ink my name in Vietnamese, Chuc Mi Tuệ, the one on my birth certificate with all of its beautiful accents, lightning above the U, ocean wave above the Y, mountaintop above, and the reflection of moon below the E. Today, I made 4 small marks and took back my native language. This next poem is about Agent Blue, another chemical that was used during the American War. Agent Blue. To kill correctly takes calculation, down to a science. Arsenic, cacodyllic acid, no water and rice on a cellular level. Make sure no surviving seed can be collected and planted, because even a small seed assures survival, because mortars, grenades, and bombs cannot destroy a grain, because our heart is made of seeds. Know what it takes to kill the seeds. Know what it takes to deprive the plant of water, to dehydrate it, to be surrounded by love, but unable to absorb it. And this poem is about the impact on the American War on our rainforest. The decade the rainforest died, the deer did not stop running. Leopards climbed into trees that could not hide them. The Duglanker and the white-cheeked gibbon cursed at the metal gods we flew, raining on them as they burned from napalm. Elephants choked on the smoke of gunpowder and poison, their steps a strange rhythm as they tried to fly. The thunder of bombs echoed the steps of elephants. Tigers exploded as they stepped onto landmines. In a forest covered with leaves dead from Agent Orange, fallen trees, and decomposing bodies of animals and people. The earthworms were washed away in monsoons with soil that could no longer grab onto roots. The Javan rhinoceros and the wild water buffaloes that were still alive wandered aimlessly. Weary with M16s and AK-47s, we marched quietly and steadily, not knowing why we were killing each other. This poem I dedicate to my children, my sons, as I know that the trauma that we carry is generational, and there's still a lot of healing going on in my own family, both my parents and my children, and within me. Photosynthesis for my sons. How can I convince you that you do have chlorophyll, that you can take the sun's energy and turn it into sugar, produce something sweet inside of you, Take the waste people breathe out and make it into something that will keep you alive, that will keep those around you alive. Create oxygen. Why do you say that this metaphor doesn't work? That you don't have the powers of a plant? That nature didn't intend you that way? Look how you twist and turn towards the light. And I'll read one final short poem. In praise of emptiness. I am looking for what's not there, that space we look through, the curve of a bowl, a window, blankness on paper, the smooth white between words, between lines, what is not said, what is not done, the hollow in a bird's bones. When someone looks at my palms, it's as if I'm holding nothing but the world. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Teresa. We have two more readers. The next reader is Wayne Karlin. Wayne is an author, editor, and teacher. After service in the United States Marine Corps in the Vietnam War, Karlin co-edited the first collection of Vietnam veterans fiction from the war, Fire Free Zone, short stories by Vietnam veterans. And in 1995 was the co-editor with Lê Minh Quế and Trong Vu of the first collection of fiction by Vietnamese and American authors who had been on different sides in the war. His books include 3 works of nonfiction, most recently, Wandering Souls, Journeys with the Dead and the Living in Vietnam, and 8 novels, the most recent of which is A Wolf by the Ears. He's also worked in radio and film as a writer, producer, and actor. Please welcome Wayne.
Thank you, Julie. And it's really an honor to be here. It's really great to see some friends that I haven't seen in years also, and to be asked to read as kind of token prose writer trying to be a poet. So thank you all for having me. I'm going to read 3 poems. The first is inspired by Yusef's poem, Facing It, and by an older poet also. It's called Odysseus Descends into the Land of the Dead. Even here, the wall, everything before it missed, everything after it missed, everything before it, everyone before it missed, everyone after it missed. Crenellated ridge, bristling with spears and mocking faces, spun into myth by lying bards, into mist, the bisection of his life bisected by. He shakes the vision from his head. This is not the wall of Troy. It is the wall of Hades, the wall of the dead. It is black and smooth and mirrored and stretches to the horizon. It does not narrow to a point of perception. It continues, circling the world. Ouroboros. It is a black band that presses against his eyes. It is a black mirror that swallows him as he draws closer. His reflection merciless, aged, crepe neck, scribbled over by the names carved in white letters into the black mirror of the wall. The names of the dead write themselves on his skin, across his forehead, his chest. The white names carve themselves into his skin. Their barbed letters rake his face like the nails of women, tangled together like discarded clothing on the deck of his ship, trench fires on his skin. Odysseus the cunning, destroyer of cities. Offerings line the base of the wall, a dove with its throat cut, a pack of cigarettes, a bottle of beer, a gutted daughter, a pack of condoms, a pair of dog tags. The offerings fade, return as the dead themselves, draining into the dirt, their faces covered with rubber ponchos against sudden rain. It washes his skin, churns the earth at the base of the wall into red mud. The dead are all wearing his boots. His body strains against its need to step back, step away. He pushes against it, forward as he would in battle. The corpses cave into themselves, into the earth, into dust that puffs up and settles in the creases on his face. He steps through the wall into the land of the dead. He will learn to fit himself, silent as moss, to the embrace of stone. He will learn to become moss, which is stone dreaming of life. The next two poems, Bruce and Yusef and I first met Vietnamese who had fought on the other side of the war at the Joyner Center in Boston. And these are both poems that have to do with reconciliation. One that is inspired by a trip back to Vietnam, and the other inspired by that first meeting we had at the Joyner Center. This is called "Drinking with the Enemy." It starts with a epigraph from Hemingway. Abstract words such as glory, honor, courage, or hallow were obscene beside the concrete names of villages, the numbers of roads, the names of rivers, the numbers of regiments, and the dates. Ernest Hemingway, A Farewell to Arms. I was the only American at the table. We were all veterans. Christmas evening in Hung Gai. In the war, one of the men said, "You bombed the church here." He laughed uproariously. "It still doesn't have a roof," he said. A red plastic Santa Claus and a green plastic Christmas tree stood in the lobby. We played a drinking game with glasses of beer. At the count of 3, everyone had to drain his glass. If he couldn't, he had to drink another glass. We drank to empty ourselves. A film run in reverse. The man sitting to my right smiled at me, gently, tentatively. Like many who had been in the war, his teeth were bad, brown-stained, and broken. His skin was pitted and lined with the years we shared and didn't share, and he walked slightly hunched over, like a farmer looking down at his earth, or like a man in a rice field, crouching under the sound of my helicopter rotors. "Odow," he asked me, then "where?" It was his only English word. He tapped his chest with the carapaced fingers of his farmer's hand, trying to dislodge the two questions we all asked each other, and the two questions we didn't. When? Where? Did you try to kill me there? Did I try to kill you then? I took his hand and pushed it against my chest. "Quang Nam Tuat Tien Wei." "Quang Tri," I said. He grabbed my other hand and pushed it against his chest. I could feel his heart beating hard through the skin of my palm. "Quang Tri, Quang Tri, Quang Tri," he said. One of the other veterans yelled, "Mut Hai Ba Yo." We drained our glasses 10 times, 9 of them for the 9 years the man to my right was there longer than I. His eyes grew desperate. His farmer's hand was trembling. He pointed at his filled glass, pointed to his mouth, tapped his forehead hard with his blunt, calloused finger. "Quang Tri, Quang Tri, Quang Tri," he said, tapping violently to dislodge the seepage flowing with the beer into his brain, pushing heavily into the cavities of his heart. I took the glass of the man to my right from him, and I drank it for him, into myself, all of it for him. It nested in my chest, an icy stone. And this last one grew out of that meeting at the Joyner Center. I met a writer who became the co-editor of the book that Julie mentioned, the first anthology that we did. This was Layman Quay, who had been a youth volunteer during the war on the Ho Chi Minh trails. So the title is Mirror for Layman Quay. At 15, she'd run away to join the army, to fight you, she said. She'd never been this close to an American before. I was 19, I said. Once she said she'd spied on GIs bathing near Quezon. needing to see them unshelled and human, but they were too far away. She couldn't see anything. You're a ghost to us too, I said. The helicopter scared her the most, she said. They came down. I know, I said, and thought of how differently each of us heard those 3 words, and then thought of her crouching under jungle canopy, the downward arc, the red flashes of my tracers, the strangeness of connection. 20 and more years before, I'd searched for her on the ground as she searched for me in the air, our eyes aching with the need to see each other. But I didn't see her beneath the canopy's weave, and she didn't see me in the stir of treetops, the light shivering like panic through the branches, until now, as simply as forgetting a dream, we looked and our faces emerged as if from leaves, as if from sky. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wayne. Our final reader tonight is Yusef Komunyakaa. Yusef Komunyakaa's numerous collections of poetry include Thieves of Paradise, a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award, Neon Vernacular, New and Selected Poems, which I just have to say, I carried around with me for like 10 years, and for which he received both the Pulitzer Prize and the Kingsley Tufts Poetry Award. War Horses, The Chameleon Couch, a finalist for the National Book Award, The Emperor of Water Clocks, and most recently, Everyday Mojo Songs of Earth, New and Selected Poems, 2001 to 2021. He served as New York's 11th State Poet Laureate. Komunyakaa is the recipient of the Ruth Lilly Poetry Prize, the Wallace Stevens Award, the 2021 Griffin Poetry Lifetime Recognition Award, and the Lannan Literary Award for Lifetime Achievement. His plays, performance art, and libretti, including Gilgamesh, a verse play, Testimony, Endangered, and Wakanda's Dream, have been performed nationally and internationally. Yusef.
I am honored to embrace this moment to speak against forgetting. Camouflaging the Chimera. We tied branches to our helmets. We painted our faces and rifles with mud from a riverbank. Blades of grass hung from the pockets of our tiger suits. We wove ourselves into the terrain, content to be a hummingbird's target. We hugged bamboo and leaned against the breeze off the river, slow dragging with ghosts from Saigon to Bangkok, with women left in doorways, reaching in from America. We aimed at dark-hearted songbirds in our way station of shadows. Rock apes tried to burrow our cover, throwing stones at the sunset. Chameleons crawled our spines, changing from day to night, green to gold, gold to black. But we waited till the moon touched metal, till something almost broke inside us. VC struggled with the hillside like black silk, wrestling iron through grass. We weren't there. The river ran through our bones. Small animals took refuge against our bodies. We held our breath, ready to spring the L-shaped ambush as the world revolved under each man's eyelid. A break from the bush. The South China Sea drives in another herd. The body balls a punching bag. Clem's already lost a tooth and Johnny's left eye is swollen shut. Frozen airlift steaks burn on a wire grill, and miles away, machine guns can be heard. Pretending we're somewhere else, we play harder. Leotis, the point man, high on Buddha grass, bears himself up to his neck in sand. Can you see me now? This is the spot they're gonna build a Hilton, invest in paradise. Bang, bozos, you're dead. French's cassette player unravels Hendrix' purple haze. Snake, 17, from Daytona, sits at the water's edge, the ash on his cigarette pointing to the ground like a crooked finger. CJ, who in 3 days will trip a fragmentation mine, runs after the ball into the white caps, laughing. Thanks. Title of his next poem. Thanks for the tree between me and the sniper's bullet. I don't know what made the grass sway seconds before the Viet Cong raised his soundless rifle. Some voice always followed, telling me which foot to put down first. Thanks for deflecting the ricochet against that anarchy of dust. I was back in San Francisco, wrapped up in a woman's wild colors, causing some dark bird's love call to be shattered by daylight. When my hands reached up and pulled the branch away from my face, thanks for the vague white flower that pointed to the gleaming metal, reflecting how it is to be broken like mist over the grass as we play some deadly game for blind gods. What made me spot the monarch driving on a single thread tied to a farmer's gate, holding the day together like an unfingered guitar string is beyond me. Maybe the hills grew weary and leaned a little in the heat. Again, thanks for the dead hand grenade tossed at my feet outside July. I'm still falling through silence. I don't know why the intrepid sun touched the bayonet, but I knew that something stood among those lost trees and moved only when I moved. The next poem is a prose poem called title, Grenade. There's no rehearsal to turn flesh into dust so quickly. A hair trigger, a cock hammer in the brain, a split second between man and infamy, it lands on the ground. A few soldiers duck, and the others are caught in a half run, and one throws himself down on the grenade. All the watches stop, a flash, smoke, silence. The sound fills the whole day. Flesh and earth fall into the eyes and mouths of the men. A dream trapped in midair. They touch their legs and arms, their groins, ears and noses saying, what happened? Some are crying. Some are laughing. Some are almost dancing. Someone tries to put the dead man back together. He just dove on the damn thing, sir. A flash, smoke, silence, the day blown apart. For those who can walk away, what is their burden? Shreds of flesh and bloody rags gathered up and stuffed into a bag. Each breath belongs to him. Each song, each curse, every prayer is his. Your body doesn't belong to your mind and soul. Who are you? Do you remember the man left in the jungle? The others who owe their lives to this phantom, do they feel like you? Would his loved ones remember him if that little park or statue erected in his name didn't exist? And does it enlarge their lives? You wish he had lied down in that closed coffin and not wander the streets or enter your bedroom at midnight. The woman you love, she'd never understand. Who would? You remember what he used to say. If you give a kite too much strain, it'll break free. That unselfish certainty. But you can't remember when you began to live his unspoken dreams. Thank you.
Well, that was absolutely incredible. I would like to again thank all of the poets. Let's give another round of applause to all of the poets. Thank you. I'm torn between just letting all of that sit with us and opening up for a Q&A, but if you don't mind, I would like to ask everyone just to take 1 minute in silence to think of the children, especially now, but also the children that all of these poets once were. So if we could just take 1 minute. Thank you. So we do have a little bit of time. If people here present would like to ask a question, I might need to, I'm not sure you'll be heard by the poets, but if you say it, I can repeat it. Or if people who are watching on the webinar have a question, they can please raise your hand, and one of our people, Liza, will see you and then can repeat your question if you type it into the Q&A or speak it. You can actually, yes, she'll unmute you and you can speak. Okay. So if anybody has a question or something they'd like to say, we'll take just a short time for that. And if not, that's also fine. Okay, Terrence is going to speak to us from the webinar.
Hi, name's Terrence Lamar, and I'm from the College of Southern Maryland, and I'm I'm here because of the communications class that I am currently taking this semester, and I have to say the speech that each poem that the poets read, so powerful that even those who were born years after the Vietnam era were pretty much gonna start thinking about how the Vietnam War truly was a tragedy, and wow, that is something for sure. It really sticks with you, just like the film Oppenheimer that I saw in theaters with my dad one time. And same thing with Sound of Freedom. And wow. Sorry, it's just I know I'm mostly improvising what I'm saying. It's just wow. That is something for sure.
Thank you so much, Terrence.
You are welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome, and I shall mute myself now.
Michael.
Thank you. I'm so deeply grateful for all this, and powerfully moved by it. I wonder if some of you would be willing to speak to how the current war in the Middle East is impacting you, particularly from the perspective of those of having fought in a war and having a deeper understanding of the grief of it all from your own experiences.
Thank you for that. Would anybody like to speak to that? Doug?
Yeah, Michael, that's pushing a lot of buttons there. I like to cut through this stuff. I'm 77 years old, right? And I'm just looking at these. I hear about these wars, and I tell people I don't look at them in terms of politics, boundaries, whatever. I look at them through the eyes of a 19-year-old Ukrainian soldier facing off against a 19-year-old Russian soldier, a 19-year-old Israeli soldier facing off against a 19-year-old Palestinian. You know, and that's what it's all about. It's just it's horrific crap that goes on, and one of the things we try to do in Veterans for Peace, by the way, is bring veterans on board to speak to other to soldiers right now, and say, stop it. We just have to put down our weapons. We really do. It's a difficult thing to do, but that's what we have to do. Remember the old Carl Sandburg poem, I think it was, of a young girl standing by a parade and said, what happens if they gave a war and no one came?
Yeah.
I think that's what we have to do. So
thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to speak to that of the poets? Okay. Are there any other questions? Yes, somebody in the audience here. Go ahead, and I'll repeat your question if they can't hear.
What made you gravitate towards poetry as a method of expressing
the question is, what made you turn to poetry as a way to express the lasting pain of the war? If anyone wants to speak particularly to poetry itself.
I could respond to that. English is my third language. Vietnamese and Cantonese are my first two native languages. And I really struggled to express, to express and to make sense of everything I was feeling growing up here in the English language until I encountered poetry, like E. Cummings, and it gave me a freedom that I didn't have in prose, because I didn't have to adhere so strictly to the rules of the standard English language, and poetry also transcends language. So it's a way that I was able to express my feelings using the words in a way that that became energy, and also pictures and sound. So I found for me, it was a good way to express and process the trauma and the consequences of the war.
Thank you. Go ahead, Bruce, and then I have one more question for Kimberly after Bruce. Go ahead, Bruce. Or sorry, no, it was Wayne. Oh, no, it was Bruce.
It was. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I have a very short answer to that question, and that is that I was fortunate to have teachers who taught me that poetry was the art of disciplined emotion, and because of that, writing about the war was not an unnatural thing to do, but a natural thing to do. That's my short answer to that complicated question.
Thank you. I'll read a question that came specifically for Kimberly. The question is, can you talk a bit more about your experience in Central Vietnam that I think the second poem that you read was about? That would be great to hear a little bit more about that experience.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
It was, first of all, I think one of the coolest experiences of my life, just because it's an opportunity that not a lot of people have. It is incredibly dangerous work to observe, and a lot of safety precautions had to be taken in order to take me out into the field where they were like actively combing through the land to clear out these unexploded ordnances. It was also a moment, I think, for me of reflection, of understanding that the wars that we wage today will have severe consequences for the future, that like the people who make the decisions or who wage the wars may not necessarily have to clean up. I think I am probably the youngest person on this panel. And so thinking, looking towards the future of like, Ukraine and what's going on in the Middle East, and knowing that first of all, you are going to be creating children like me who are very traumatized because of, the trauma that, my parents have endured, but then also a generation of people later who have to clean up kind of these messes, the bombs that will inevitably not explode. So it was a surreal experience, but I'm really, really grateful that the State Department has committed an additional, I think, $20-some million in funding. And so, yeah, is there like a specific part of the
trip? Oh, it was an anonymous question in the chat. So, but that was good. Thank you. Yeah. Well, I think we'll end the Q&A there because of time. But this was truly a remarkable event, and I'm very, very grateful to Ron and Linda and Liza for including me, and then for all of you for bringing your work, which was absolutely wonderful. Thank you. I want to make 2 announcements. This is the closing event of this really amazing 10-day long series of events. But there's 2 things that are ongoing. So one is that there's a prize, and anyone who's a CU Boulder student should know about this. It's a student essay contest. It's a $500 prize. And the details of how to, what the prompt is for the writing of this essay are on the website for this event. So please check that out. The deadline is December 13th. So this is a short essay that you could write after finals. And then the other thing is that there's a visual exhibition, which is curated by Ron and is in the basement of this building. And I saw it today. It's really interesting. It's a lot of artifacts and materials about veterans, or really soldiers of the Vietnam War, American soldiers who were working for peace during that time. And that is a really interesting history that that we should all take a look at. So thank you again. Thank you for being here in person. Thank you for being here on the webinar. And thank you to all of the poets whose work is available. If you Google them, you can find their books and buy them. They're all just fantastic people and poets. Thank you so much. One last round of applause for everyone. Okay, see you all again. Okay, I guess I'll end it. It's so hard to end these things. And